Welcome everybody today to the next one in our series of PSDI webinars. So today we're going to be hearing from another one of the PSDI Pathfinder activities. So in today's webinar, Leandro Laborio from STFC is going to be talking to us all about using the Galaxy platform in large-scale experiments. Without further ado, I'll let us get straight into the webinar, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Leandro.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Leandro Laborio from the Scientific Computing Department at the Science and Technology Facilities Council in the United Kingdom. And I'm also the leader of the Pathfinder 7, which is in charge of reproducible computational workflows within the PSDI project. And in this talk, I will present the work that I have been doing together with my colleagues Patrick Austin, Subinder Devadasan, Abraham Nieva de la Hidalga, Alex Velozerov, and Tom Underwood on the use of the Galaxy platform for large-scale experiments. Part of this work was done within the PSDI project, and in the presentation, I will talk in some detail about the Galaxy tools that we are developing for two of the large-scale experiments communities that we are working with. These are the muon community and the catalysis community. And my idea is to structure this presentation as follows. First, I will briefly mention how we found the Galaxy platform and which are the issues that we are trying to address with this platform. Second, I'm going to describe some of the features of the Galaxy platform that make it suitable for addressing these particular issues. And then I will present examples of the Galaxy tools that we are developing for the muon and the X-ray absorption spectroscopy communities. And finally, I'm going to present some conclusions and plans for the future. So let me start with how we decided to adopt the Galaxy platform. The Galaxy project started as part of the muon spectroscopy computational project, the MSCP, where we develop sustainable, user-friendly software tools that are used for the interpretation of muon experiments, which are a type of experiments that we do in the Rutherford Appleton laboratory. Now, the muon spectroscopy computational project is a joint project between the Scientific Computing Department and the ICES Neutron and Muon Source at the Science and Technology Facilities Council. And in this project, what we do is we do the entire thing. We develop the physical models for the muon experiments that we want to simulate. Then we build software prototypes of those models that we implement initially as command line software tools, which are desktop based. And then we move into Galaxy. And the reason why we move into Galaxy is because the muon community is quite diverse. And an important proportion of this community was asking us for basically graphical user interfaces for our command line tools. And this is how we decided to try and use Galaxy initially just as a graphical user interface. And we started working with Galaxy and developed a Galaxy instance for some of our muon tools. And it was then that, well, we realized that Galaxy is, well, much more than just a graphical user interface. And we used the expertise that we had developed with Galaxy to start expanding this platform into another areas of materials science. At the moment, we are part of a European project, the Euroscience Gateway project, where Galaxy is being expanded into fields such as astronomy and climate science, for example. And we are also part of the PSDI project where we are working to expand galaxy into X-ray absorption spectroscopy experiments that are used for catalysis. So the key issues that we're trying to address with Galaxy in the muon and catalysis communities are essentially sustainability, reproducibility, and user-friendliness of the software tools that we will then be connecting into workflows. And also we are interested in the reproducibility and transparency of these workflows that we create. So these are the issues, and why did we decide to use Galaxy to tackle these particular issues of reproducibility and transparency of workflows and processes? Well, because some of the reasons are because Galaxy is a quite mature system. It's open source, it's web-based, and it's a platform for fair, intensive research. Also, Galaxy can combine software tools into complex workflows, which can then be saved, shared, and easily reproduced, which makes the whole research process more transparent. And also because Galaxy, as it is web-based, there is no need to install anything. And the software tools that we develop within Galaxy are quite easy to distribute among the community. And finally, Galaxy this year is almost 20 years old and has a large international community, well-developed methods for learning how to use this system, and also a well-established Galaxy training network. So those were the software issues that we were facing. So those were the software issues that we were facing, and why we decided to use Galaxy to tackle these issues. Now, what I'm going to do next is to show you some concrete examples of the work that we are doing for both the muon and the catalysis communities. So in the case of the muon community, I lead the muon spectroscopy computational project, where we did the entire development of the software tools for the interpretation of the muon experiments. And in this case, we use Galaxy to foster the use of computational modeling for interpreting muon experiments. We also use it to increase the uptake and distribution of our software tools, to improve the transparency and reproducibility of the research results, and also to develop a simple graphical user interface for our tools. Now, with regards to the catalysis community, well, the needs of the catalysis community were quite similar to those of the muon community, but the key difference was that we did not develop the based software tools, which is work to secure their ease of use by creating associated Galaxy tools. So these are the two materials science communities that we are working with. And in the next slides, I'm going to describe in more detail some of the specific problems that we tackle using Galaxy. And finally, how all these help us to engage and onboard these communities. So let me start with the muon community first. This picture here on the right shows the target stations 1 and 2 at the neutron and muon source in the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory in the Science and Technologies Facilities Council. In target station 1 here, TS1, is where the muon experiments take place. And what are muons? Well, muons are subatomic particles that are generated in this target station 1 and then fired into the samples that we want to study. And the particular property of the muon is that it stops at a particular sample. So it doesn't diffract like an X-ray, for example. stops in a particular sample, and knowing this stopping site is quite useful for the interpretation of the muon experiments. And within the muon spectroscopy computational project, we develop a method for finding this stopping site. And the challenge that we tackle with Galaxy in this case is implementing this methodology inside the Galaxy platform. So what you see here is the general workflow associated with the methodology for predicting the stopping site in a crystalline material. The example here is just crystalline copper. And the workflow involves essentially 5 steps, which includes running an external computer simulation on the host material. This is a density functional theory type of simulation. And then a set of 3 steps, 2, 3, and 4. We have to create a set of muonated structures within the host material. Then we need to relax the muons in those muonated structures. And finally, we perform a clustering procedure with all the relaxed muonated structures. And at the end of this workflow, we have a set of clusters. And these clusters are associated to the potential muon stopping sites in our sample. That's how the workflow works. And before we had Galaxy, we ran this workflow using the tools that we develop as command line tools. And you can see the names here. The software that we are using for running our density functional theory simulations is CASTEP, which is a UK flagship DFT code. And as I said, these tools initially were desktop-based tools that needed to be downloaded and installed by the users in their computers. And one of the inconveniences we have with this is that the transparency and reproducibility of the results that you run in this way, depending quite a bit on each particular user. So we move into Galaxy. And what we have in Galaxy is essentially we have one tool. So the density functional theory simulation is something that you have to run externally of Galaxy. And then we have a tool for running steps 2 and 3, and a tool for running step 4. So we have a tool for running the generation of the muonated structures and their optimization, and another one for the clustering. And these images here at the bottom show how the Galaxy webpage looks like. On the left of the Galaxy webpage, you have a list of the tools that you have available. For example, here you have the UEP Optimize, which is a tool that creates the muonated structures and then relax them. And when you choose one tool like this one, then in the central panel, you have the parameters for that tool, the parameter that you can adjust for then running your tool, which you run by clicking on this button here. And if you want to see how these tools look in real life, you can go to this website. This is the Galaxy instance that we maintain here in the scientific computing department. You can go there and look for these tools and run them if you want to try how they run. And in this slide here, I'm going to show you with a short video, essentially how steps 2 or 3 are run. So how we create the muonated structures and then relax them. The first thing we need to do is we need to load the files from the density functional theory simulation inside of Galaxy. And in this example here, I'm loading the files from a computer. You need to load 3 files: the main CASTEP output file, a file containing the charge density, and the file with the relaxed structure of the host material. And as I said, we are loading this from a computer, but Galaxy has many options to load files. I mean, You can load data from different sources, from databases, catalogs, things like that. And as you can see on the right side of the screen, as you perform each one of these tasks, they first are gray, then yellow while they are running, and then they become green when everything went well, meaning in this case, we loaded the files successfully. And you can keep track of this history of everything you do. And this is one of the main features of Galaxy. And once we have all the files in, then we choose the main parameters for performing the creation of the muonated structures and then the relaxation. And we run the tool. And it's running now. And then at the end of this process, we have a collection of muonated structures with relaxed muons in them. And what we have to do is we have to perform a clustering procedure on these relaxed structures. I'm going to accelerate this so it's over. Then we move to the next step, which is running the clustering procedure. Now, the Galaxy tool for running step 4 works and looks the same way as the previous one. And this is one of the advantages of Galaxy. The graphical user interface is the same for all tools, which make these tools quite easy to use. And what this clustering tool does is it selects the results from the previous tool as an input automatically. And we can then choose the parameters for running, in this case, a hierarchical clustering procedure over those results. And at the end of this process, we get a list of the potential stopping sites. It looks like this. In this case, you have 2 potential clusters, and those are the potential stopping sites for the muon in this particular system. So, and Galaxy is, so we've run the whole workflow. We've got the potential stopping sites. And one of the main advantages of Galaxy is that it's quite good in terms of transparency and reproducibility of its results, because all the workflow involved in finding the muon stopping site can be saved in Galaxy, as you can see here. You can save it, you can share it, you can modify it at any time, and this makes the works very transparent. So the workflow for this method is here. I'm going to click it, and we have a graphical version of this workflow where you can see, for example, the 3 density functional theory files that we have to feed to the first Galaxy tools. And you can also see, if you click on a given Galaxy tools here, you can see all the parameters of that tool with their values, and you can modify and edit the values of these parameters and consequently modify the workflow. And then you can save it and you can run it again at any time. This is, you can reuse it. So it's all very transparent, the process of what you've done with Galaxy. And that's the example for muons. Now, as you can see, the Galaxy capabilities are quite useful for the issues that we had with the muon community. Galaxy has provided sustainable and user-friendly software tools that are, well, easy to distribute among the community, but also easy to connect into workflows. And these workflows, as you could see, can be easily saved and reproduced. And for example, 3 weeks ago, around 3 weeks ago, we gave an extensive tutorial on how to find the muon stopping site using our tools in the 2024 International Muon School that took place here in the Rutherford Appleton laboratory. And we have a recorded version of this tutorial, which is part of the Galaxy Training Network. Is here. So if you click here, you can see the whole workflow. The whole tutorial, in case you want to learn a little bit more about how to calculate stopping sites in crystalline materials using our tools. And we presented our Galaxy tools in many places, and at the moment, for the specific case of the muon community, we are working on including a new muon tool in Galaxy, which is called the mu-Dirac, which is a tool for the modeling of negative muon experiments. Most of the muon experiments are positive muon experiments. This one is negative muon experiments. So that was the muon community. Now, the next community that we're working with is the catalysis community. And the challenge that we are tackling here is the interpretation of X-ray absorption spectroscopy experiments used in catalysis. This picture here shows an aerial image of the diamond synchrotron source at the Rudolph Lapton Laboratory in the Science and Technology Facilities Council. And this is where the X-ray experiments are performed. We essentially work with two beamlines that work in collaboration with the catalysis hub. It's the B18 and the I20 beamlines. Now, X-ray experiments for catalysis generate data that is processed by several software tools, which we then connect into complex workflows, just as you could see with the muons. Now, as I mentioned before, we didn't develop these software tools. The challenge here was to use Galaxy essentially to improve the transparency and reproducibility of the workflows that people create with these sort of standard tools that are used for processing X-ray absorption spectroscopy data. Now, this big diagram here shows the general workflows associated with catalysis experiments. Now, the ones that we are processing using Galaxy are in this red box here, and are connected essentially to two things: the processing and normalization of the raw data coming out from the instrument, and also the subsequent analysis of this raw data using a set of well-established software tools. Now, without Galaxy, the analysis of the raw data is done using a set of desk-based tools with names such as Dawn, Athena, Artemis, and Fez. And you can download those tools as part of the Demeter package. And this flow diagram here on the left shows essentially how these tools are connected in a workflows. And the picture on the right, these pictures here, show you the graphical user interfaces for these tools. And as you can see, there are many tools here, more tools than we had with the muons. But second, we have a lot of parameters to consider with each tool. And as a result, we have much more complex workflows being created when we process X-ray data. And we think that Galaxy is a good option to manage these complex workflows. So to transfer these desk tools into Galaxy, what we did was we broke up this process into 4 associated Galaxy tools that you can then link into a workflow. And the picture here shows how we broke up the process and also the names of the tools that are a part of the workflow. For instance, Large Athena is this part of the workflow, is used for processing and normalizing the raw data that comes out of the instrument. And then we have these other tools, Large Fez, Select Parts, and Large Artemis. And I'm going to show you how this works. But the idea now is to show how each of these tools work in Galaxy and also how we can connect them into a workflow that we can then reuse. And this is the reusability is particularly important for X-ray processing. Now, but before I go into the details of how these workflows work, I would like to use just a couple of slides to comment on the basic ideas behind an X-ray absorption spectroscopy experiment, because I think this is useful to understand what is done, what is it that you do when you run the workflows. So what is X-ray absorption spectroscopy? Well, this is a type of experiment that it's done at the diamond synchrotron source. And in the example here, we have a iron sulfide sample, crystalline material here. And what we do in one of these experiments is we fire an X-ray beam to our sample with a certain energy E. And when this beam hits the sample, let's say of width X, part of the beam is absorbed and part is transmitted. And if we use the intensities of the initial and transmitted beams, we can define something called the absorption coefficient, mu. And we can plot this with our tools. For example, in the case of iron sulfide, the variation of the absorption coefficient mu with the energy of the beam looks something like this blue line here. We have that mu first decreases, then there is a jump, and then continues to decrease with some giggles, let's say. And using this equation here, what we can do is normalize this plot and also define what we call as the extended X-ray absorption fine structure, which is this part of the plot. Okay, this is the normalized and flattened plot, and this is what we call the x-axis part of the plot. Now, the jump here indicates the energy of the incident X-ray that it's absorbed by one of the atoms in the structure. In this case is iron, and then and then we have an electron that is released from the iron into the iron sulfide crystal. So what's going on here? What happens here is that in quantum mechanics, the X-ray hits a sample, it is absorbed, in this case by an iron atom, and then emits one electron. Okay, and the electron has an associated wavelength. This is because of quantum mechanics. And when the iron emits this electron, the wavelength associated to the electron is scattered around by the atoms, the neighboring atoms of the iron atom. And the constructive-destructive interference that it's caused by this scattering is the origin of the wiggles on the extended X-ray absorption fine structure, this wiggle here. And all of the catalysis workflows that I will show you later essentially are used to fit this extended absorption fine structure part of the plot. But the function, one of the functions that we will be fitting, so we start by fitting the absorption coefficient, but then we will not fit a function that it's a function of the X-ray energy, like in this plot here, but a function of the weight number k associated to the emitted electron, photoelectron, that we will be fitting with Galaxy, because this function is useful for determining the atomic structure around iron. So this is it. This is all I'm going to say about X-ray absorption spectroscopy. So now let me show you how these tools work. What we have here is the large Athena tool. And again, we first load the experimental data into this tool, and then we choose the appropriate parameters to plot the data and normalize it. Again, in this example, we are loading the data manually, but Galaxy, as I mentioned before, could take different sources. And as you can see, the data here, you have energies and intensities, basically. You load that data, and then you plot it. And what you get is the plot here that shows that I showed you before, and then the normalized X-ray absorption coefficient of the sample that you are studying. And it is the analysis of this plot that gives a lot of information about the catalysis processes associated with the sample. And this analysis is done with the other Galaxy tools that we have created. For example, the large FEF tool, which again looks and works very similar to the previous large Athena tool. And basically, we apply this tool to the structural CIF file corresponding to the iron sulfide, which in this case I've loaded for convenience. And what we do here is basically we calculate all the possible scattering paths that an ejected electron, so we have the iron atom absorbing the X-rays, then ejects an electron. This electron may have many possible scattering paths. That's what we calculate with this tool. And what we need to indicate when we set up the parameters is basically which is the atom absorbing the X-rays and which is the radius of a sphere containing what we consider to be the scattering region. And we execute the tool and obtain a potential scattering path within iron sulfide, which are included in a FEF input file, which looks like this thing here. And all of those paths are potential directions for scattering the photoelectron that is emitted by iron. And then the next tool, select paths, we select some of those paths that we will use. Some paths are automatically selected, but we can also choose them by hand, as we can see here in the movie. And we can also choose some of the initial values of some of the variables that define the path. The result of all these processes is a table containing the parameters that define the selected paths. And in this example, if I remember correctly, we end up having, I think, 3 paths in a total of 3 selected paths. And finally, we can run large Artemis, which makes use of all the results in the project. So the results from the Athena tool, from the FEF tools. And what we do here basically is we fit this X-ray absorption fine structure function, chi. And basically we need to define a range of k values for fitting these functions. And these plots, and what we're gonna do here is we're gonna reproduce these plots here, that the plots we saw at the beginning. This is done by the Artemis standard tool. And what we're doing here is we are going to reproduce these kind of tools with Galaxy. This is how it looks like. Now, so one of the things we can see here is one of the key differences with the muon tools, with the X-ray tools compared to the muon tools is that the catalysis tools for X-rays need that we have more tools and they have many more parameters per tool, and this makes the whole workflow much more complex. But the good thing is that these associated workflows, as we did with the muons, can be saved, shared, and edited in Galaxy. You see, as you can see here, the whole workflow for what I've just done is much more complicated than in the case of the muons. But all of this information is saved in Galaxy and you can use it. This is particularly important because one of the things that we want to do in the future is use Galaxy to process inoperando experiments. And the way you do that is by applying in specific workflows to many, many different sets of data. So having this capability is quite useful for, we think it's going to be quite useful for processing inoperando experiments. So a brief summary for the catalysis results. Well, we've created 4 Galaxy tools, not the original tools, the associated Galaxy tools that we can use for creating a workflow for processing X-ray absorption spectroscopy data connected to catalysis experiments. These Galaxy tools have many parameters each, and we are working. So as you could see from the graphical user interfaces of the original tools, we have a lot of things to choose from, and we're working with the catalysis community to determine, let's say, a set of, we could say, standard parameters to include in each one of the Galaxy tools, at least initially. Then you can expand those parameters if you want, but a kind of a standard set of parameters that you choose and can easily run an analysis, because that would simplify and hopefully increase the use of these analysis tools by the users of the X-ray facilities at Diamond. However, even if with the simplification of the amount of parameters in each tool, the Galaxy workflow that you create with this tool is a little bit big, but you can save it, you can easily reproduce and share. And also the Galaxy tools are quite easy to use and distribute because these are web-based tools. And that's all. So a few of the things that we are planning to do for the future. Well, as I mentioned before, we are working within the PSDI project with the Catalysis Hub to curate the Galaxy tools for the processing of X-ray data, just to try to find this standard set of parameters for each tool. At the moment, we are developing a sort of a standard workflow for processing a normalization of the raw data with the Athena tool. Just only one tool, because this is something that, according to our colleagues from Diamond, this is something that everybody should do. Everybody does to some extent, but normally people from Diamond do it for them. So they just the normalization of the data. And here, for doing this, we are using data of several groups that are working with the Catalysis Hub. This is recent data. So we've processed this data, and we're going to have meetings with the members of these groups to try to teach them how to use the Galaxy tools. We are also working within the PSDI project with the computational collaborative project for nuclear magnetic resonance crystallography. And basically what we want to do is implement some of their NMR tools in Galaxy. Another idea that we have for the future is perhaps see if Galaxy could be used for workflows associated to neutron experiments. And as I said, the conclusion for muons, we are including a new muon tool called MuDirac. And this is the materials Galaxy team in the United Kingdom, in the scientific computing department of STFC. It's myself, Subinder Devadasam, Alex Belosero, Patrick Austin, Tom Underwood, and then in the Catalysis Hub, our colleague Abraham Nieva de la Hidalgo. So I'd like to thank them all for their work, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, so we have a question. If you modify a saved workflow in Galaxy, does it result in a new workflow, or does it save the amended parameters in the workflow record?
You can do both.
Okay, so basically, if you modify like the workflow, then does it kind of give you the options to either create a new variant kind of the workflow, or to just kind of
you can keep the old one and then modify it, a new one, and you have a new workflow with different parameters. Yeah, you can do both things.
Okay.
And save it in the
So if you did, and I might have misunderstood exactly that. So obviously, if you do modify it and you don't create a new a separate workflow, does that then modify that workflow for other users of that workflow, or does it just modify it kind of for yourself?
I think you modify it for yourself, and then you can share it if you want.
Okay, so yeah, there's a follow-up comment there saying with regard to that question. They were wondering how that might impact the kind of the reproducibility in terms of obviously making amendments to like the workflows.
Sorry, what's the question?
So that was a follow-up to the question about modifying the workflows.
Well, I mean, let me see if I understand how to respond this. Well, the way I'm going to give you an example with muons. The way we've used this with muons is we run, for example, our tools for finding the muon stopping site within Galaxy. And then you can save this entire procedure in Galaxy, the workflow, the files, everything. And you can share it and you can attach it as a research object, for example, into your publication. And that's how you secure reproducibility. And you save that workflow is saved. Then you can create a modification of a new workflow, but that's a different thing. So if you're gonna reproduce, if somebody wants to reproduce what you published, it can go into the research object that you attach to your publication and run everything again.
So in terms of obviously, I guess for the workflows and obviously potentially for people obviously who haven't used Galaxy, so the workflow is obviously is the completed like record of what you did in the experiment, and then there's also, I guess, the template that somebody like they could use it themselves. But I guess does that also have? So that also has all the parameters, but I guess would there be a version of the workflow that almost doesn't have the data bits in it, like the inputs and outputs? So that's almost like the template that they could then use.
Yes, you can. That's used a lot because something that I didn't mention in the talk, Galaxy originated in the bioinformatics community. And in the bioinformatics community, they do a lot of workflow sharing, let's say. So you define this template of a workflow and then you share it so that if people want to do genome annotation, for example, they can do it sharing the workflow. So you can do that, but you can also create this, let's say, associated research object, which is the workflow plus everything that you use for creating a particular set of results. And if you want to reproduce those results, you use the workflow with all the associated data.
Excellent. I mean, particularly in my mind, I guess that clears it up. I think sometimes in different domains, obviously they use very similar terminology with a sort of slightly different meaning. So we have another question here. What is involved in integrating a new tool into Galaxy? So for instance, I guess if you were putting a new sort of one of the programs or scripts kind of in, does that require a large amount of programming effort?
The answer is no, especially if the tools are in Python, but you can do it with anything. We are actually at the moment integrating a C++ tool into Galaxy. But I think if Subinder or Patrick would like to add something, because Subinder, for example, is doing the integration of a C++ tool into Galaxy right now. So Subinder, if you want to add something.
Yeah, so it's, as a developer point of view, it's quite straightforward. You write XML script for the command line tool. Use it. All the input parameters or input data you can configure by writing an XML file. So it's pretty much simple and straightforward.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, it may just one comment. It may take some time, but I guess it depends on the person to familiarize yourself on how Galaxy works. But one of the great things I think of Galaxy is the training network. It's huge. You have a lot of material, and the people are the Galaxy team, they are very responsive. So we started from scratch and learn everything essentially by interacting with them. So
we have another question here. So obviously, those workflows that are produced in Galaxy, do they contain all of the documentation that a user would need to kind of actually understand what the workflow is kind of doing and actually use it themselves? Or do they have like potentially, is it a separate kind of tutorial or guide that would be required alongside it?
Let me see if I understand the question. For example, the documentation of a workflow associated with a given publication is the publication. So in our case, we've got the publication, we run the functional theory calculation, we found the muon stopping site using this procedure, we describe the procedure, and then you go to the research object, and you can go into the Galaxy platform and run the whole thing again. So reproduce exactly what we did. Okay, it's not that you just look at the parameter. No, you run the whole thing and see where the results come from. So I think that's would be an example of what I understand from documentation. Another example, you can ask me something again if I misunderstood the question. But for example, for the method for finding the muon stopping site, we did this tutorial, okay, which is and it is in the Galaxy training network, but it is for this particular methodology for finding the muon stopping site. You go into that tutorial and you have videos and examples of everything about how to run this method with Galaxy. But I guess the level of documentation will depend on the workflow we're talking about, on what you are doing. For example, a workflow for processing X-ray data would be more complex and would require a little bit more documentation. But yeah, but we don't do it by default, let's say, the documentation.
So I guess,
Yeah.
is it, so if I took just the workflow in Galaxy, so assuming I came across it not via a paper or something, I just came across the Galaxy workflow, is it technically possible to embed the kind of documentation inside Galaxy in terms of, you know, like notes or I guess kind of guidance inside Galaxy?
Well, let me see if I can.
Yeah, so the comment in that is like, in terms of like, I guess an analogy is like commenting inside your code.
But let me see. I'm gonna share my screen for a minute. This is a real thing. This is Galaxy, okay? And you see, when you choose a particular tool, you have explanation about each one of the parameters that you need for running your tool. And then another key thing is that workflows in Galaxy are normally associated with this history here, you see, on the right. So everything you did is here, all the data, all the files, and then you process them with this workflow, which is documented. You see, for example, in the central panel, in the parameters. So, but then, yeah, when you edit your workflow, let me see, you can add comments to what you did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like it's technically possible to do that. Therefore, it's then up to the person kind of creating that sort of set of steps to actually include that information. That's very helpful. And I think Patrick's also added a comment that it supports, I assume, markdown comments. So excellent. I think comment in the chat from Patrick regarding so that the workflow within Galaxy stores all its revisions, which I think was what you just demonstrated with the history panel. And so if it's shared, you would also be able to see all of the previous revisions and then would also be able to kind of execute the previous versions of the code as well, even if there was a more recent version. So that obviously shows some of the elements of reproducibility across the kind of history. So asking as a user, I could write a workflow which integrates my program into Galaxy and not just the ones you've implemented before. So I assume that means basically, essentially, can we write our own things in Galaxy? I think.
Yeah, of course. You can create any wrapper for any tool you've got. You can create an associated Galaxy tool. How you do it, it depends on just, let me show you the example that I showed for the X-rays. You see, this was the normal workflow for processing X-ray data. And we created associated Galaxy tools, wrappers, for this bit, one tool for processing all of this, another tool for all of these parts, and so on and so forth. And you can do this with anything. Yeah. You can create your own tools and then make your own workflows with those tools. This is also an approach that is used for example, transforming a Jupyter notebook into a Galaxy workflow. Sometimes you have a very long Jupyter notebook and you take pieces of that Jupyter notebook, transform it into a Galaxy tool, and then another piece, another Galaxy tool, and connect it into a workflow so that you can save everything that you do.
Excellent. And then one final question. So somebody's asked, outside of publications, so you obviously talked about research objects in publications, is there any other place that you can share the workflows?
Yeah, well, in Galaxy. So if you become a user of Galaxy, you have so you are interested in a particular set of tools. You in our for example, for our tools, you became a user of our tools, and then you can share the workflows with any other user. And I think Workflow Hub is another place where people share workflows.
Right. Well, thank you very much to Leandro, Sabindev, and Patrick for that information that you've shared with us today. It's been really interesting. Hopefully we'll see lots more work being carried out on Galaxy. And I wanted to say thank you to all of our attendees for attending our webinar today. Hopefully we'll see you at another webinar soon. But for now, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll hopefully see you all soon.